Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another long awaited episode of The Fortress. I am Caleb, and with me, like old times, is my good friend and co host, Michael.
What up? What up?
Yep, it has been a hot minute since we've done this. Unfortunately, scheduling is difficult when you're both adults with full time jobs and all that sort of stuff, but we've come
Major
back.
life changes.
Yeah, those two. Um,
I don't know. One of us may or may not have gotten married. Who knows?
Yeah. Um, we'll not reveal which one of us, but one of us has gotten married. Um, but we have decided to come back together again to discuss Ahsoka, the new Star Wars series, now that it has wrapped up all 8 of its episodes. And um,
A
very,
blessing and a curse,
yeah,
I would say.
yeah, it's going to be interesting to discuss this, but I'm excited to do this. Uh, but before we get into all that, like what geeky stuff have you been doing lately, Michael?
Geeky. Ooh. Obviously, still keeping up with Star Wars, a lot of the Marvel, DC stuff. But I've recently gotten into a lot of like anime and Gundam models. So I've dived into that side of pop culture that I've only grazed the surface as of a couple of years ago.
So for those in the audience and people like me who don't know exactly what you're talking about, can you explain that a little bit?
Which part, the anime or the Gundam models?
The Gundam.
So Gundam series of is a series of anime that are basically robotic suits like mechs, and so popular series I believe stemming back in like the 80s and 90s that's still going, but part of that was a big model kit community developing around these different Gundam suits, and so with the model kits they're kind of like buildable action figures with really good detail and posability.
Okay, nice.
More or less display pieces rather than actual playable figures.
I gotcha.
Well, what
Sweet.
about you? What have you done in the past couple years?
Well, I've done a lot of stuff in the past couple of years, but as of lately, um, not a ton, honestly. I've been trying to recently get into the old Star Wars Legends continuity of things. Um,
Now relevant more than ever, it would seem.
yes. Yeah, and Ahsoka really put me in a Star Wars mood when I started watching this. So that's what's gotten me going back into all of that. Um, we're getting ready to watch Doctor Who. We're about to start going through that. Uh,
Ooh, I need to catch up on that. I'm a couple seasons behind.
Yeah, we're getting ready to go through that with and we're not going to get caught up in time for the 60th anniversary. Um,
Is
late,
that November? Is that next month?
yeah, it's
Wow.
November 23rd, I think. Um, yeah, the 60th anniversary is coming up. Um, we're not going to have time to go through all of Doctor Who before then, but I definitely want to introduce Priscilla to that and. Um,
How far has she gotten? Or is she hasn't seen any of it, has she?
She was in the living room with me when I watched one episode a few months back, but she was like doing her own thing, and that's the most she's ever been exposed to Doctor Who. So
Which episode was it?
it was the one at the end of, I think it's series 4, when the Daleks steal Earth, like move Earth, and all of it's like at the end of David Tennant's time, and so like all of his companions and side characters come together.
Okay.
That's one of my favorite two-parters in the show. But we're getting ready to go through that here soon, and then
You're gonna take her through nine, or are you skipping nine?
I'll take her through 9 because
Okay.
that's important for a lot of the Russell T Davies stuff.
Yeah, true.
Um,
I forget there's a lot of continuity. I know a lot of people when they're first starting just skip 9 and go straight to 10.
yeah, we're probably gonna watch it straight through all the way to the end of Capaldi, and then I don't know if we're gonna watch any of Whitaker's stuff or not, because I'm not a big fan of that era
That's fair. I
of
still need to
Doctor.
watch. I need to watch your stuff. Actually, I think I need to finish Capaldi because I got maybe one or two seasons in,
Yeah, I'm
and then I stopped because I think I got caught up at that point, and I haven't started back yet. So
okay. Capaldi's stuff is some of my favorite in the show, and then I just consider the show to have ended when he regenerates because I do not like almost anything about Whitaker's era. I like some ideas, but the execution of almost everything I think is kind of terrible.
that's fair. I've heard mixed opinions about her take on it.
I think she would have been a pretty good doctor if the writing was better. I think the problem is almost entirely in the writing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because there are times where she's given fairly good material and she does pretty good in the role. Um, I just don't like a lot of the writing she has to deal with. But
Okay.
maybe we'll do something on Doctor Who in the future.
Yeah, 'cause I still need to sit down and watch all of those.
Yeah. Um, ha- we'll get to Star Wars in a minute, but how do you feel about David Tennant coming back?
It will be interesting to see what they do or how it does because I haven't heard watched any like the trailers or stuff for the 60th anniversary. I just remember seeing the announcement that he was coming back
Okay.
and some of the photos. That's all I know about the 60th.
Yeah, I've been keeping up with a lot of the news and everything pretty hard. My biggest concern is that it's going to be the same thing that the 50th anniversary special was, which I like that episode a lot, but it is not a celebration of Doctor Who as a whole. It's a celebration of the modern show. And I'm afraid this 60th anniversary is just going to be a celebration of David Tennant's um, time on the show with everything in the trailer because they're bringing back Donna for that episode.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I did see that.
which I don't like. They gave her a really good ending, and I hate that they're undoing it, but whatever.
I mean, she was a fan favorite too, so it's kind of hard.
Yeah,
Because when you think David Tennant's Doctor, you think of like Donna or Rose
one
as
of
the
those two.
companion. Martha was there, but I think out of the few companions he had, she was like the weakest one.
Yeah,
I
she was a
think.
good one season companion, but I don't really think of her as like one of the great companions. Um,
Yeah. Because like Donna was always like the sassy one, always matching Tennant's energy, and then Rose like the love companion.
yeah, which I have the unpopular opinion of I don't like Rose, so I'm glad they're not bringing her back. But
What was your complaint with Rose?
it's been so long since I've watched the seasons with her. I'm gonna have to rewatch them to remember exactly what it is. My biggest problem is, and this is just a personal taste thing over anything else, I don't like the Doctor having like a romantic interest. It's the same reason I'm not a huge fan of River Song. Um, I just think the Doctor as a character is one who works better. Not
Oh, but that was all right. So now so those River Songs episodes were always some of my favorite with Matt Smith because I think those two absolutely match energy so well
no,
that I like the pairing with those.
I like them together, like acting wise. I just as a concept, am not a fan of the Doctor, like being romantically involved with another character. Part of that too is I have delved not like super deep, but well enough into like the classic series and everything, and that's a big thing in that show is that he just does not get romantically involved or anything. And so like part of that is influencing my like opinion on the modern show of okay, well you had like 8 iterations of the Doctor before that who never had any romantic interest, and now
So is the old show set before or after the Time War? Because I
it's
forget
all
that.
it's all before. Um,
Okay, because then it's the Time War with 8, I believe, right? And then it goes to the modern, which is I guess post Time War.
yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
and part of it too is probably because he's obviously the last of the Gallifreyans. He's kind of I guess lonely in a sense.
Yeah.
And so part of it that's probably why he has so many companions. I guess in part due to the beginning of the series, but then also here later with the modern series, it someone to accompany him because it kind of gets. I feel like it would kind of get lonely for him being how old he is and his with the regeneration cycles. You know, having someone there to be with him would probably help him out mentally.
Yeah, that's fair. Like I said, it's a personal preference thing before it's like a good or bad thing. It's just something
Yeah.
that I don't personally like. Um, but I get that argument too. I understand that I'm in the minority with that, and most people love Rose as a character. Um, but
And I'm trying to think because it's also been a minute. I liked her with 9, but I think by 10 it got. I think by the time 10 came around, I think I got a little tired of her character.
yeah, I
But then that's what when we went to not Martha, Donna. I thought it was a nice change of pace.
yeah. I,
Then again, it's been years since I've watched, at least from the beginning of this new series. So I need to go back and watch it at some point.
yeah, I think that was my, or at least similar to how I felt about it too. But I'm excited to go back through it because it's my favorite show, and I haven't watched through the whole thing in a long time. So I'm really looking forward to that, and especially getting to watch it with someone who's never seen it before. I'm really excited
Oh yeah,
about. But yeah, you ready to get on into discussing Ahsoka?
let's do it.
All right. Do you want to give a quick synopsis of what this season is about?
So Ahsoka picks up, I believe, after Rebels season 5, with Ahsoka and Sabine looking for Ezra after he and Thrawn escape from Lothal on the Star Destroyer with the Purrgil, and so that's what this season is, them hunting, trying to find Ezra and bring him back home. Which I thought was an interesting take because I did enjoy Rebels. 'Cause did you ever watch Rebels or no?
I've seen bits and pieces of it, but I've not watched through the whole thing.
It's a good watch. The first couple seasons are a little slower and a little more, I guess, cringy because at that time, kind of like how Clone Wars was in its early seasons, it was kind of made for kids, and then they picked up a lot of the older audience,
Yeah.
and so it started getting a little more mature. I guess, or it started going away from like the kid appeal to some of the more adult kind of themes, which
Yeah,
I thought was a
and Rebels probably had that
good
even
choice.
more so than Clone Wars because it started out on Disney. So it was probably more aimed at kids than even early Clone Wars was.
Yeah, because Clone Wars spent a lot of its early stuff on Cartoon Network, so that's what they probably could get away with some of that. But yeah,
Yeah,
no, good.
I was just going to say, because even some of the darker stuff that comes in later in Clone Wars still happened while they were on Cartoon Network, because that's when the Darth Maul stuff happened, and a lot of that is kind of the darker, more adult stuff for that show, too.
Yeah,
But but this also follows Ahsoka's appearance in the second season of Mandalorian, where she um, gets information on the location of Grand Admiral Thrawn, and is just kind of a continuation of that story as well. Because what's her name, Morgan Elsbeth, right?
yes, yes.
She was the villain in that episode of Mando, and she's back as a major antagonist in this show as well. And then, of course, we've also got two new characters made for this series, Balin Skull and Shin Hati, who are two. At least Balin Skull is a former Jedi turned mercenary working
Yeah.
to help
Those
find
two
Thrawn.
are some of my favorite characters from the Ahsoka series.
Mine too, especially Balin Skull, and I'm gonna be very interested to see how they handle that character now that the actor's passed away.
Yeah, because there's a whole rest of the arc for him that I was hoping they were going to wrap up in the season finale, but obviously based off the season finale, they're still going to continue that story. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, and of course, full spoilers ahead. We're gonna get into all the details of everything, but that was my biggest issue with the finale is that they don't
They
pay
don't
any of
wrap
that off.
up. Yeah.
And
So
it's
that's what I was sitting there like the last 5 minutes. I was like, all right, cool. Recap, see everybody at, and then credits. And I was
yeah,
like, there's no wrapping up the story. There's no announcement that season two was going to happen. So it's like, I'm going in. It's like, all right, cool. We're going to wrap up the storylines. We're going to see what Balin's been hunting for. Like we're going to, everybody's going to get home safe. Thrawn's going to be defeated, based off of what we have with like the sequel trilogy and some of the other stuff. It's like, all right, Thrawn's going to be defeated. Everybody's going to be home safe, kind of stuff like that. And then when Ezra's the only one that makes it, Ezra and Thrawn are the only ones that make it back to the Star Wars galaxy. Balin Skull's still on the hunt for what has now been revealed the Mortis gods. And Shin Hati's, I guess, taking over that camp of bandits. And then obviously Ahsoka, Hu Yang, and Sabine are stuck with the little, I guess, turtle, snail people. I forget
yeah.
what their actual species name is, but which, speaking of Hu Yang, he is in my top third for this series. David Tennant's reprising his role from the Clone Wars series, but also the amount of like sass and emotion he gave in some of those lines,
I was
I
about
really enjoyed.
I was about to bring that up too, because
So we're on the topic of the 10th Doctor. I might as well bring up his character in Ahsoka.
yeah, and I'm not super familiar with Clone Wars. I've seen bits and pieces of it. I never knew that he was in that show until,
So
um,
it was only for like two, maybe three episodes. There was a youngling training arc. I believe it was when Ahsoka took the younglings to Ilum to get their crystals or whatever, and then that's what he was there showing them how to build lightsabers and whatnot.
Okay.
So he was a very small character in Clone Wars, which is why they kind of got the cameo, were able to get the cameo with Dave Tennant. But then actually bringing him into the Ahsoka show in live action, I really enjoyed because they did bring back Tennant.
I didn't even know he was going to be in this until Hugh Yang started talking in the first episode, and I got so excited because Tennant's one of
Right.
my favorite actors. So that was a very nice surprise. But yeah, I liked his character a lot. Definitely one of my favorites in the show.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments with him is I believe it was episode 5 when Hera and was it Carson Teva find them at the Night Sisters site right after Ahsoka goes over the edge and Sabine's taken by Baylan Shin. He's holding Sabine's helmet, or Hu Yang's holding Sabine's helmet, and he says they never listen.
Yeah.
You remember that scene I'm talking about? That's one of my, I don't know why, that's just one of my favorite scenes because we don't ever see a droid portraying those kind of emotions. And that's what I'm glad Tennant brought those kind of like emotions out through his dialogue.
This is
Because
probably
you can tell, definitely tell that Hu Yang and Ahsoka have been traveling for a while, and so they developed that kind of relationship.
this is the most human a droid has ever felt in Star Wars for me. Like even over C-3PO, um, like there was so much more personality and emotion in his portrayal of Hugh Yang than I've seen in any other droid character in Star Wars before, which I really liked.
I don't know. Chopper's up there for like a close second in terms of emoting, I guess. Man's a war criminal, all right?
Like I said, I haven't seen enough of Rebels. What's he like in that show?
So, trying to think of what based off of Ahsoka. So, episodes 6 or 7, they're in the courtroom, and that one senator makes a comment about evidence being delivered by a droid, and Chopper kind of goes off, makes some noise or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There's that, and I just realized season 2 when they go, Hera and him are on the Phantom trying to throw a tracker on that one ship. Like it's those two scenes, but like turned up to 10.
Oh
Like
wow.
Chopper is a straight menace. In Rebels, I believe he has like a confirmed kill count of like 5 million.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
No, that's what I'm saying. He's a war criminal. He blew up like. There's one episode where he gets the title war criminal because like he blows up like a star destroyer or two, and so like everybody on that ship dies.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why he gets the title war criminal. Because he just goes on a rampage that episode.
That sounds hilarious. Just
Chopper. So not only his actions, but he also the interaction between him and Ezra and Rebels. They're always constantly bickering with each other, and so it's another thing that adds to Chopper being a fan favorite amongst Rebels fans.
I gotcha. Yeah, I need to go back and at least watch a couple of the bigger arcs of that show, if not go through the whole thing. Um,
I would definitely recommend watching the whole series, but there are a few arcs, especially later season 3 and 4, that are a lot. I find a lot more enjoyable.
okay.
I don't know, mainly because I like the darker and more mature stuff, and so that's what 3 and 4 is kind of where it gets to that point. And then obviously season 5, I definitely recommend watching all of season 5 because that's really where Thrawn comes into play.
Okay.
But yeah, season one's cool because it has a Grand Inquisitor, which I think Kenobi did him dirty in that show. Because like obviously the looks from Kenobi were off, but Grand Inquisitor season one of Rebels was by far the best portrayal of him.
Okay.
And I'm trying to think, season two. Oh, season two is where they brought in Maul. That's right. The Malachor arc at the end of that season is really good as well.
Okay. Because that's where they end off Maul's storyline, right?
So that is so with the Malachor arc, that's where we first find Maul. That's the first we ever see a Maul post Clone Wars. And then the Malachor arcs, that's where Ezra's first a little tempted by the dark side through Maul. Kanan gets blinded, and then Vader shows up, and so then it becomes Vader versus Ahsoka,
Okay.
and then that's where Ahsoka's first canonical death would be, because for a long time that was her official death, and then they go and retcon it in season 5 with the World Between Worlds. And
Oh,
that whole scene where they pull Ahsoka out of that timeline, spend a little time with the World Between Worlds, and then she goes back through uh, later in that episode, and that's where her story, I guess, picks up.
I forgot that Rebels introduced time travel into Star Wars.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's what, with her being in the World Between Worlds, that's where her return in episode 5 was so excited. Because that was one of the big speculations when the show got announced was, will we see the World Between Worlds in live action due to obviously her connection to it, and with her bird Morai being the living embodiment of the sister from the Mortis gods,
Okay.
which is also which made episode 5 more exciting, because obviously we saw the World Between Worlds. We get Anakin back, and a younger Anakin too, not only from the Revenge of the Sith era, but then also the Clone Wars era, which they did good job with those scenes.
Yeah, his look was straight out of that show. I mean, it looked perfect.
Oh yeah,
How much he looked like that character in early seasons.
because the end of episode 4, where she jumped into the world between worlds, I was a little off put by his look at the very end of that episode. The CGI didn't sit well with me, so I was kind of concerned with episode 5. But obviously, episode 5 is where they spent a lot of their budget, uh, and it looked really good, especially seeing him in the Clone Wars season 1 through the first half of season 3 armor. Seeing that clone armor, and then not only the live action clone troopers, and obviously live action Rex, along with actually a really well done young Ahsoka and the Siege of Mandalore Ahsoka. I really enjoyed, because they pulled out all the stops for that.
Yeah, were you kind of surprised that they didn't bring Rex in this show at all, other than that flashback? Because isn't he like confirmed to still be alive post Return of the Jedi?
So, Return of the Jedi is kind of where his story ends at the moment, because obviously there's some debate about whether or not he is the old guy that attacks the shield outpost on Endor. So, as far as we know, that's his last canonical appearance. I don't think we've explored much of him after that.
Okay.
So that I know there was a lot of there is obviously some potential that they could bring him back for that, or could have brought him back in this series. I think I'm glad they didn't, because obviously this is 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so everything's kind of up in the air. But with, I think because of season 7 or season 8 of Clone Wars, as well as like Bad Batch, we've just got a lot of Rex content as of recent.
Yeah, that's fair. And I kind of have the problem, and it's not like a huge problem, but of just this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later on when we get into just Star Wars in general. But recently, Star Wars has been feeling very small to me, just in all everything's so connected where everyone just keeps showing up in everything. Like, I didn't watch much of Bad Batch because it's not like my type of thing with Star Wars. It's not what I'm really interested in with Star Wars. But I know that both Hera and what's her name from Mandalorian? Is it Fennec Shand or whoever?
Yes. Yeah, Finnick, yeah.
Both of them show up in that show. And then, of course, you've got the Inquisitors in Kenobi. And everything just, like, it's got, like, you've got this cast of, like, a few dozen characters. And they just all show up in everything.
Well,
And
because part of the issue is they're picking stories that are in or telling stories in the most concentrated parts of the timeline.
yeah,
With Bad Batch, that was kind of my one complaint, was they brought in Hera and Finnick. Finnick kind of works in that story, uh, just because obviously she's a little younger character at that point, and kind of into her bounty hunter career, so that kind of works. I guess she was a fan favorite in Mando, which is why they brought her in there. Uh, also kind of with the Hera storyline too. So, did you ever watch any of the Bad Batch or no?
I watched, I think, the first 3 or 4 episodes of season 1. And that's as far
Okay,
as I got
so
into it.
the Hera arc is later in season 1. So Rex and the boys, or Rex contacted the Bad Batch, and they went out to can't remember the planet now, but Lythal. Oh, no, that's wrong. Whatever the Twi'lek planet is,
Ryloth?
or whatever. Ryloth. Yeah, there it is. I was thinking Lothal. Lothal knows or something. That's what it was. Yeah, Ryloth. So I believe the Empire's occupation just starting on Ryloth, so they're dealing with the Twi'lek resistance led by Cham Syndulla, Hera's father. So that's why Hera kind of gets brought in a little bit, because you're dealing with an established character from Clone Wars who's then related to a fan favorite from Rebels. So it kind of makes sense bringing her in there.
Okay.
And then obviously with Kenobi, obviously a famed Jedi Knight of the Republic on the run, and we know obviously Vader's hatred for him due to leaving him on Mustafar burning. That kind of makes sense, having Inquisitors after him.
Yeah.
Now, do I agree that the I like the Inquisitors were there. I don't like the execution though. Uh, Obviously not only from character designs, but I was never a fan of Reva, the second sister, I believe was her designation.
Yeah, I
But
think so.
I was never a fan of those specific Inquisitors that they picked,
Okay.
because at that point you're dealing with Obviously, I think those are the only Inquisitors at play at that time, because like the other, like the ninth and seventh sister, I believe were off finding Cal Kestis in uh, Fallen Order at that point.
Okay,
So that's why you couldn't bring in a couple of those.
gotcha. Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
obviously, yeah. So you're placing those in and around Rise of the Empire, Post Republic. There's a lot going on there, and then with Mando, Book of Boba Fett, and now Ahsoka, you're dealing with post Empire, kind of New Republic era, leading into the rise of the First Order, which I say is kind of a good place to be. I think now it's gotten really kind of saturated, because obviously up until what was it, 2012? No, when did they release Force Awakens? Was that 20? That wasn't 2012. That was later.
That was 2015.
15. Yeah, there you go. Obviously, up to that point, nothing from Star Wars was explored after Return of the Jedi, and so that's what bringing the First Order in with Force Awakens. You're like, how can a new empire rise? You know, after this old one was dismantled, wouldn't you think that the Resistance or New Republic be on the lookout for this? So that's what I like how they're bringing with specifically Mando season 2 and a little bit of season 3, where they're showing the arrogance and ignorance of the New Republic. Like, yeah, the Empire's gone. There is no order rebuilding. So then that's why you kind of see why everybody was shocked when the First Order appeared in Force Awakens.
Okay.
Also, season two of Mando, started showing cloning of Force sensitive. Showing started that, which leads to obviously the reveal that Snoke was a clone or a failed clone experiment to bring back Palpatine in Rise of Skywalker? Not Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
no,
it
it
was
is
The
Rise
Rise of Skywalker.
Whatever. The last movie in the sequel trilogy there. That's kind of what they're kind of showing, is building that bridge between, because otherwise you're going from Return of the Jedi to 20 to 30 years later, the rise of the First Order, something like that. So it kind of makes sense that they're building in this space. Obviously, there are some shows that they really didn't need. I thought the Book of Boba Fett was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, that was really disappointing for me because I was really looking forward to that show, and yeah, that the first few episodes are just so boring and nothing happens, and then 2 episodes are just Mandalorian season 2.5, and then the last episode is just insane, like just off the wall craziness, and like none of it works as like a cohesive show.
Yeah, because that's what I think. Because obviously they brought back Boba Fett with Mando season 2. Was it season 2 or season 1?
2.
2. Okay, yeah, that's right. So obviously they brought him back, so you're already seeing a fan favorite character from the original trilogy, who up to this point we all thought were dead. Also, I believe he survived in the EU Legends continuity in a similar fashion, where he kind of crawled out of the Sarlacc pit. But I mean, it was kind of cool seeing his climb out of the Sarlacc and recovery up until the point Mando season 2. But the storyline of taking Jabba's throne and dealing with that, I don't think was necessary.
I liked that idea on paper a lot. That's what I was really excited about, and I just thought that the way that they handled that was boring to just kind of stupid, honestly. Um, because I was telling you before we started recording, the thing that I go to Star Wars for is like the Jedi, the Force, the kind of mysticism, light fantasy of it all. But
Mm,
when it's not that, the other thing that I love from Star Wars is like the bounty hunter stuff. Um,
that's fair.
that's my other favorite side of Star Wars. My least favorite side of it all is like the military politics side of it. But I do really like the bounty hunter stuff, and so I thought that idea of when we saw Boba Fett in the movies, he was working for Jabba and was um, kind of just brute force working for him, and now he comes back and we're seeing him taking over that side of things, and now he's running it, and I was really looking forward to that. And again, just the execution of it was really dumb. That is the audiobook I'm listening to right now from Legends, is the one where he gets out of the Sarlacc pit and everything.
Okay. Because
um,
what does he do after the Sarlacc? I just remember hearing that he climbs out. I don't think I ever heard
I
what he does after. Or
I
have you gotten to that
literally
part
just
yet?
started listening to it earlier today. I haven't gotten more than like 20 minutes into it, so I don't know exactly what he does after
Okay.
that. But but yeah,
But going off of what you said about obviously being Jedi versus Sith being the main backbone of Star Wars, I feel like the bounty hunter and military is another side they do that is pretty good because obviously we've had obviously within the last few years we had the sequel trilogy come out, which wasn't well received, but then you had Rogue One, Mando, obviously these big hits that show the different side of Star Wars, which is why I guess I liked them because at that point, especially within the last, well, I guess up 2015 to present, we've been so saturated with Star Wars content that it doesn't have the almost doesn't have the same appeal as it did within the early 2000s to early 2010s, where it mainly had nostalgia factor to it.
well, that, and I think that Star Wars used to be an event thing. Like, you had your trilogies, which each movie in those were 2 to 3 years apart, and then between the trilogies, you had 10, 15 plus years between each of it. So every time you got a new movie, it was a big deal. Like, oh, Star Wars is back. And of
Which
course,
I guess that's what's led to Force Awakens success because the last one was it '03 or '04? Revenge of the Sith, I believe, is around that time.
it was
That's
'05, I think. I think there was exactly 10 years between those
almost
two.
10 years. So that's what, yeah, we had 10 years to, I guess, stew on these old movies, but kind of in between that time, we had gotten Clone Wars and Rebels, but no big, uh, I guess, high budget movie.
And
And
you
so
can
that's what.
and you can
Good.
tell the difference between Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, because I know that movie didn't like bomb, but it did not do good financially. And like between Revenge of the Sith and Force Awakens, you had 10 years of no Star Wars movies. And then between Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, there were 5 of them. Force Awakens people liked fairly well. I mean, you had people that didn't like it, but for the most part, that was fairly well received.
I mean, to be fair, it was almost a straight. A lot of the sequel trilogy were straight rip-offs of the original.
Right. Um,
And that's what I believe Force Awakens was heavily straight ripped kind of from the New Hope. Follow the same plot lines with like the same style of characters.
yeah. Um, but it helped that there was no Star Wars for 10 years, so people were a little bit more forgiving of it in that movie.
Yeah.
And then you had Rogue One, which was very successful. People really liked it. Then Last Jedi, which was very split down the middle, very polarizing. Um, Solo, which was kind of meh. And so by the time you get to Rise of Skywalker and that movie, everyone hated.
So, Rise of Skywalker had, I guess, issues during shoots, terrible writing, and they end up switching like the story like halfway through production.
They were writing and editing that movie during shooting.
Because did you ever hear what the original idea was for Rise of Skywalker?
Um, was that when it was called like Duel of the Fates or something like that?
Yeah, so it was I forget what the main story was, but like it was I think it was like Palpatine was still supposed to return, but it was more set on like Coruscant, and I think it was like a darker, a little more horror themed style.
Oh wow. I had
I
heard
could be it had a lot better premise on that story than what we actually got.
I had heard a little bit about that, but I didn't remember all of the details.
Because it was also a different director.
It was the Jurassic World guy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also I think he ended up quitting or leaving, and I think that was another part of it too. There was no consistency amongst the story and directors. Because if they would have kept that guy, it would have been three different directors for the three different movies. So
Yeah,
that's kind of why it didn't flow too well.
because like all three movies were originally supposed to have three different directors and like three different writing teams. And of course, in the end, J.J. Abrams ended up coming back to write and direct Rise of Skywalker. But it's still really awkward where like there was no one in charge of just like either one person or one team of people like planning out the whole trilogy um, beforehand. And I think that's what should have happened, where even if you had different directors, there was still like one person or one group of people that from the beginning had at least some sort of plan. And
Yeah.
those movies had zero plan moving through uh, that whole trilogy. Because you have Force Awakens, which is nothing but a setup movie. It's just entirely setting up all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan
Which
Johnson, go ahead.
so leading up to setup movie, Disney dropped the ball on that because they set up Finn to be like the main Jedi character, which I would have really enjoyed seeing this stormtrooper turncoat basically becoming a Jedi. But they went and gave it to Rey, which I thought was like a terrible choice
Yeah, because
compared to later on.
it kind of ended up just being the most generic thing to do. Like it would have been really cool to see this former stormtrooper.
Because
Who,
did you remember much of the marketing for Force Awakens?
e- yeah,
If I remember, it was all like Finn with the lightsaber.
yeah. I think the
Like
main
they were
poster.
banking on his character being like the fan favorite, and that's what they build new uh the new trilogy on, which I thought would have turned out better. Obviously, maybe keep Ray as force sensitive, but I don't like maybe switch their characters, and it might have turned out better. But Ray just wasn't as appealing as a main character as I felt like Finn could have been.
Yeah, or maybe both of them could have been Jedi by the end or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, Finn, I think, is the most wasted potential in those movies.
Oh yeah.
because almost immediately, like even in Force Awakens a little bit, but from the very opening scene of Last Jedi, he is just a joke character. Like they do nothing interesting with him, and it's crazy how The Mandalorian in one episode has a better story about a former stormtrooper than the entire sequel trilogy does.
And then they wrote her out of the show. But uh
Oh, well, that too. I forgot that Cara Dune was. No, she wasn't a stormtrooper, was she? I'm talking
yeah.
about Bill Burr's character. Um,
Oh, okay. No, I think they're both were because I think she was former shock trooper.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that part. Um,
Oh no,
yeah.
I thought that's who you were alluding to the whole time.
No. Okay, so the Mandalorian had two better.
Two turncoats,
Wow.
and they executed. Both of them were executed perfectly until they fired Gina Carano and wrote her character out.
Yeah, I forgot about
That's where
her
it kind
too.
of started going downhill because they didn't. They briefly mentioned Cara Dune in season 3 of Mando, but she never showed up.
How did they explain her not being there? Because I never watched that season because that came out right around the time of the wedding, so I had zero time to spend on that. And then I heard nothing but bad things about how it ended, so I never went back and watched it.
So, so season 3 of Mando mainly deals about the conflict of in Mandalore, or trying to unite the Mandalorians and take back Mandalore. Well, Mando went back to, uh, I forget the name, but the main planet where his group of Mandos were from in season 1. Well, Grief Targa, I believe his name, Carl Weathers' character, whatever, has rebuilt the town into this proper state or whatever. And so that's what he and Cara Dune, I believe that's how they set it up at the end of season 2, was that they were going to build it up together. He was going to be like the mayor or the leader. She was going to be the marshal or sheriff, whatever.
Okay.
Well, at the end of that episode, I believe she also got contracted out by the New Republic or became like a law enforcement agency for the Outer Rims through the New Republic. Well, that's what when we go visit them, whatever 4 or 5 years, I believe is the time skip between season 2 and season 3. We find out that she's away on business to like the Inner Rims or whatever, visiting Coruscant, the New Republic or whatever.
Okay.
So that's how they got away with writing her out. It's just, oh, she's away, dealing with her New Republic duties,
And
and
then
that's why we just don't see her.
conveniently, she'll probably never be seen again.
No, yeah, no, they've written her character out of that story now.
Yeah.
Which I liked her character, especially season 2, but yeah, unfortunately, yeah, she's gone now. I think now they're shifting away from Din Djarin to more the Mandalorian culture as a whole for season 4.
Okay.
Because that's kind of what they were leading to. Because obviously, around like the second half of season 3 of Mando, you get all the groups of Mandalorians together, and the season finale is them retaking Mandalore. And that's what Din and Grogu. Do you want spoilers or no?
Go ahead, because I
Yeah,
don't know when I'm going to have a chance to watch it.
okay, so at the season finale for season 3, Din takes Grogu, basically adopts him as his son or his ward or whatever, to actually kind of indoctrinate him into the Mandalorian or the Mandalore cult or whatever their little system is. So he adopts him, and then they go eventually buy a house, settle down, and kind of retire, in a
Oh.
sense. So that's what I think season 4 is going to focus more on Bo-Katan and like the Mandalorians on Mandalore.
Okay.
I think's what it is.
Interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of how they went away from Din Djarin's character to more Mandalorians as like a whole, as a culture as a whole, basically.
That's weird to build an entire show for 3 seasons on one character, or I guess basically two, and then move away from them in.
Well, 'cause that's what it was. Because obviously, season 1 and season 2 was getting Grogu back to obviously trying to get him to Luke. I guess at the end of season 2, getting him to Luke to train as a Jedi. That was his whole goal. And then with the Book of Boba Fett, obviously season 2.5 for Mando, you get Grogu back with Din, which obviously I believe it's been at that point it was like 5 to 9 years, I believe is what Filoni and Favreau said in an interview. It was like there was a time jump there, and so that's what I guess Din just missed Grogu, and so he went to go see Grogu, and that's what Grogu ended up deciding to leave Skywalker School, and they just go off and do their own adventures, which was kind of what season 3 was,
Okay.
which I felt like was a completely step back. Because I feel like if they did more, going back to kind of what worked with early season 1, was it just being Din bounty hunting and not having to try and deliver Grogu back to, trying to get him to Skywalker and then turn around literally basically the next episode within the Mandalorian continuity, give him right back to Din and slash Mando, and they go off.
I was about to say, how lame is it to have this really good emotional ending of season 2 and then resolve it in a cliffhanger or in a spin-off show, in 2 episodes of a spin-off show, and then pick up in season 3 like nothing changed. Like that's
It's like literally the way it's executed in the show, it feels like maybe a week has passed since Mando hands Grogu to Luke, and then he comes and visit him at the school. There's literally, I think, like 4 or 5 years, which was the more confusing part because then it messes with the Mandoverse timeline, I guess you can call it.
so. Wait, if there's 4 or 5 years between that, when does Ahsoka take place? Because she's there in Boba Fett. She's there at Luke's school.
So, Ahsoka, I believe, takes place like 5 to 10 years after Return of the Jedi.
Because the opening of this show plays like it's not long after her episode in Mando, because it opens with Morgan Elsbeth being transported by the New Republic, and she was arrested in that episode.
So, trying to think, I remember what I was reading earlier, but yeah, it's supposed to be. Well, so Morgan Elsbeth gets arrested, and it sounds like maybe there's obviously some time between her getting arrested and then her escape with Balin and Shin. I don't think it's quite drastic as a time between that. But yeah, that's what I don't know what the timeline is. Because did she show up in Book of Boba Fett, or was it just?
No, she's there, and she's talking to Luke in one of those episodes.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Was it that? It might not have been that long then. I can't remember because they stated it in an interview,
Okay.
which is why it kind of threw everybody off because the show had it as one had it kind of said as like one thing, and then they ended up coming back and saying, it was like, no, it's been. It might not have been that long, but it sounds like it might have been closer to like 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
But it was still definitely a little bit of a time jump. Whereas obviously with from in a Mando season 2 to Book of Boba Fett, it wasn't as long, is what it felt like.
Okay.
So that's what, yeah. So obviously going back to where we started with this conversation, the reason why some of these later shows uh, having all of the tie-ins that they do is because obviously you're choosing some of these congested points in time with story that could potentially have rich a lot of stories, but with the success of like obviously Mando, that's where Disney's and Lucasfilm's pivoting their story onto.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because obviously, if you're having a big hit, why change what you're doing? And obviously, with like the fan favorite, when season 1 debuted, there was a big rallying around Mando and Grogu. So that's why Disney's kind of kept with that theme, and they're still playing with those characters.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so I just realized we're like an hour into this, and we've barely talked about Ahsoka itself. Um,
Right,
as a
I went
show.
off on a tangent.
No, we both did. um, what's probably your favorite thing about this season and your least favorite thing?
Uh, so my favorite, which kind of what it kind of off on this tangent, was episodes 5 mainly with that world between worlds and getting a lot of the Clone Wars flashback. But outside of that, my favorite was how early episodes they set up Balin Skull, Shan Hati, and kind of like Ahsoka to be these gray Jedi. You know, not necessarily following the Jedi code, not necessarily Sith, kind of doing what's good for themselves, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then from there, their shift in character personalities, no, not as personalities, but their motives. Because obviously, with Ahsoka having a transition that is similar to Gandalf's in The Lord of the Rings, which is where Filoni kind of pulled inspiration from Ahsoka's transformation, going from a gray Jedi to aligning herself more to what her motives and feelings were kind of toward to her Clone Wars era herself, where she was in the Jedi Order, kind of that's what she was. And then Balin's skull shifting to wanting something what the idea of the Order was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So those were some of my favorites, is seeing the gray Jedi and their motives. Because obviously we don't have many interpretations of gray Jedi, because there was never, a lot of that was kind of more dealt with in Legends.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of seeing that idea being brought into kind of into continuity and canon now is, I believe, is a cool concept that could be developed even more, especially if we were to kind of like tie into post Order 66 during the height of the Empire, where there was a lot more of self-discovery, I guess, of a lot of these characters
Yeah.
with the fall of the Jedi Order and all that.
It's
But
interesting.
my
'Cause go ahead.
go ahead, you good.
I was just going to say, because in the original Thrawn trilogy, one of the main antagonist in the book is a gray Jedi, or as the terminology they use is dark Jedi. Um, it's interesting reading some of that early legend stuff because the word Sith is never used in the original trilogy, or at least maybe it's added in like special editions, but in the original versions, it's never used. That wasn't introduced until Phantom Menace, and so in that, Dark Jedi is used kind of a bit more synonymous with what would become Sith. Um,
Okay. Oh yeah, true that. I guess that was when it was first. Would have been 99 with Phantom Menace. Yeah. Okay.
but it's cool to see that concept being used more and more in canon with these two
Yeah.
characters.
I also like how they gave a name. And I'm blanking on the name right now, but to the Jedi that were trained, kind of post order,
Oh,
because
I missed
Balin
that.
mentioned it. Yeah, so they're on Peridia. It's like whenever Balin and Shin are hunting Sabine and Ezra, Balin says a name, and I forget what it was, but it's a descriptive to describe Jedi that were trained kind of in the wild after the Order, and then that's what Shin makes a comment about. Is that why you're training me this way or something like that? And then that's what Balin responds, no, I'll train you to be something more or different. I forget what the exact terminology was. Because obviously he didn't train her to be. He didn't train her in the foundations of the Jedi like he was. He did it, trained her a little more, I guess, open ended, open to her own interpretations of how she wants to operate and how she wants to do things.
Right.
Whereas where we see with like, I guess kind of with like Ahsoka, Ezra, kind of canon a little bit. Some of these Jedi that really had a lot of their training rooted within the Order and still trying to follow those philosophies, even though the Order is gone.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that he gave a name to that. That's pretty cool. Um, what's your worst thing about the season?
Uh, there's a couple things. I wasn't a fan of Sabine's character, and I kind of felt like they focused on her character a lot more than they should have. Because I feel like with the show being called Ahsoka, I feel like it'd be more told from Ahsoka's point of view than Sabine's. I don't know. I wasn't a fan of. I mean, Sabine was a cool character in Rebels, but I wasn't too much of a fan of hers. And then
That
obviously, I guess with the little time skip we have, and her trying to find Ezra, it kind of. I don't know if it was. It might have just been more the writing, I guess, but
that is definitely my worst thing about the show is that it has kind of the same problem I think a lot of the Arrowverse shows had, especially towards the end, where like the show would be named Supergirl, but you'd have like a whole team of characters that are all equally as important or more important at times than the title character. I thought this show definitely had that problem where it's called Ahsoka, but you have an entire episode where Ahsoka's not even in it, really. Like, um,
yeah,
I don't know what you would have called it, but I wish either that she was the focus character throughout the whole show or it had a different title. I just don't like that it's called Ahsoka, but she's not really the POV character throughout much of the show at all, other than that one episode where you get the Clone Wars flashback and everything.
yeah. I think the premise was good, but I felt like the characterization was a little off compared to what we've seen in Mando and Book of Boba Fett, those appearances. I thought she was trying to think. And those she had a different feel to what she did at the start of Book of Boba Fett. Or not Book of Fett, or Ahsoka.
Yeah, something.
I don't know if you got about that, but it was I don't know, there's something about the characterization kind of put me off.
I had that a little bit in Mando and Book of Boba Fett, more so in Mando, where she didn't quite feel like the same character as Clone Wars and Rebels, but I did have that a lot more in this one than I had in either of those two, where she definitely feels like a very different character. And I know that like 10 years have passed or however much time since she was in Rebels or whatever, but like she felt way too much like a different character without enough of an explanation why.
Because in Rebels felt like a good continuation from Clone Wars, and everything we've seen her was happening to her in Clone Wars. The live action, at least kind of Mando, kind of kept that same characterization, but Book of Boba Fett and the Ahsoka show kind of moved away from it,
Yeah.
which I wasn't kind of too much of a fan of. Then the other thing I wasn't a fan of was obviously the season finale. I felt like we should have at least have one more episode and truly wrap up the storylines because they left a lot of that open ended, and
And
I
I
was not a fan of it.
I think the reason so much of it is open ended is because they're building up to more stuff. Like, clearly, they're building up to some big event with Thrawn and some big event with whatever is calling out to Balin's skull or whatever. But I wish there was more.
That's with Bane's Skull. That's what am curious to see. Because did you catch that he's standing on a statue of the father with the son flanking his left and the daughter missing her head off to his right?
I did catch
Did,
that, yeah.
did you catch that? Which is why I'm conflicted because that'd be like a cool story arc. But with the passing of Ray Stevens, I don't know how they would pull that off.
I don't know if they'd recast him or just write him out and continue that story on without that character, which um, he is my favorite character in the show.
Same, which is conflicting because obviously with the actor having passed away, before keep in mind this is before I don't even think he saw any of the completed edits of his character, and for him to be in some of the standout scenes in the series is conflicting because obviously he's one of the better parts of the show, but then they can't continue using him, or I feel like they shouldn't continue using his character.
Yeah. Um, so I don't know if they're just gonna write him out or what. Like, it would have been really weird. They should have done something at the end of this season, like just throw in something to explain why he's not going to be there moving forward.
Well, I
Um,
mean, for we don't know if they're because they haven't announced anything regarding season two, other than there potentially might be. Because that's what if they do continue the story, I really don't think they should do. They really shouldn't bring back his character because Disney hasn't had a good track record of using characters after their actors passed away. The
Yeah.
biggest thing I'm kind of poking at is obviously the Rogue One ending, where they use the deep faked Princess Leia, and then obviously with the Last Jedi being Carrie Fisher's last movie, not being well received by fans either.
Well, no, because remember, they use deleted scenes from The Force Awakens to keep her in Rise of Skywalker.
Oh
Um,
yeah, and Rise. I forgot Rise of Skywalker too.
which
That's
to
right.
me
Yeah.
is way worse than anything they did with like the stuff in Rogue One. The Rise of Skywalker stuff is just hilariously bad. Um, but yeah, they and then also speaking of Rogue One, how they also use
Okay, so that I know where you're going with this. Tarkin at least looked good.
yeah, but
I, I completely forgot about that until you started bringing it up. Tarkin at least looked a little better
he
than Leia did.
he looked more realistic. But I don't want them to do that with Balin's skull. Partially because I just, on principle, don't like doing that with actors who have passed away. I don't know if you ever saw Ghostbusters Afterlife from a couple years ago, but spoiler alert for that movie, they did that with Harold Ramis's character because he passed away a few years ago, and they used
I think I
CGI,
heard about that.
and it's awful. Like it's it's terrible, and I don't think they should do that. I think that they either should, with Ray Stevenson, either recast or just not use that character again.
I don't think they could replicate the way Ray Stevens portrayed Balin Skull, because that was not only with his build, like the build of the actor and how physical uh Balin looked as a character, but then also the way his mannerisms, the way he spoke, and like how he portrayed himself on screen. I feel like that'd be extremely difficult to try and either replicate or make better than what they already have.
Yeah, that performance was great. I don't know how. And of course, this isn't like a critique of the show because like you can't. They couldn't have predicted that he would pass away or anything, but it's just an unfortunate situation where now it's like, okay, what do you do? Because there was no resolution to this storyline, and now your actors pass away, and so how do you continue that moving forward, especially since
Yeah.
that does feel like everything about how that whole thing ended did feel like major setup for things to come moving forward. They're definitely building to something with that, and I just don't know how you move forward with that given real life circumstances.
Yeah. I wonder if it would be best to not continue the story. Because if you think about it, Ahsoka doesn't show up in the sequel trilogy. None of these characters do, but you can make an argument that Thrawn could be, like part of the backbone of the First Order. So some of these other characters could be playing in the background or have potentially died off, once the sequel trilogy comes around. I feel like it would just be better that way because I don't. It'd be too difficult trying to explain what happened, especially on Balin's side, with the absence of Rey.
Yeah. And since you brought up the sequel trilogy, that kind of leads into something else I wanted to talk about. Everything that they're kind of setting up with Thrawn returning possibly starting a new civil war, um, and then all the stuff with like the Mortis gods. All of that is really big deal, like major stuff that you would think would be like common knowledge and like would be referenced by the time of the sequel trilogy. So, and there have been rumors about this for a while of like Filoni's and Favreau's sort of area of Star Wars being used to kind of like soft reboot the franchise out of sequel trilogy territory, since those
I,
movies were not well
I've heard of that
received.
too. I've heard that too, but then I've also heard in an interview that Filoni and Favreau have said that they're not retconning the sequel trilogy.
Oh, okay.
They've said it, and then obviously, why would season 2 and season 3 of Mando progress the story in the direction of the sequel trilogy, especially in regards to cloning uh, force sensitive creatures, which then leads to Palpatine coming back in Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah, that's fair. Um,
So, as much as everybody would like uh, Filoni and Favreau to, retcon the sequel trilogy and create a new ending there, they're not going to.
yeah, that's fair.
'Cause yes, arguably, I agree. With their vision of how they want to do things, it would probably turn out better than what we've gotten from the sequel trilogy. They just already stated that they're not going to do it, unfortunately.
Okay. I didn't hear them say that, but then, and of course, we don't know where they're going with all of this stuff, but it's really awkward to then be like, okay, Thrawn's back and like possibly about to start a new war with the Republic. And I mean, I guess they could do something like what you said, where that sets up the First Order more so than it's its own thing. But it would be really, it's just really weird that like no one talks about that in the sequel trilogy. Um,
Well, I mean, because the First Order, in the New Republic's ignorance, that's how the First Order rises. So
yeah.
that's what very Don could very much, especially with how much he spent um, planning and meticulously, thinking things out. All we know is right now he's on Dathomir with an army of what can only be uh, described as zombies.
Which was one of the
'Cause I-
coolest moments in the finale, was just they kill all these stormtroopers and then they all come back as zombies. I thought that was really cool.
yeah, but then also, I say zombies, I meant corpses, but because that's what the biggest rumor is, that the payload that he was loading up on his ship from the Night Mothers, whatever, were corpses of Night Sisters that died on Peridian. That's what they're bringing them back to reanimate.
Oh,
Is one of
okay.
the biggest theory, because the boxes that they're moving around look like coffins in a sense. And if you were, I don't know how true this is, but if you're actually to like kind of slow down on some of the scenes, you see them kind of like, you see the caskets kind of rock a bit, making it look like there's something alive in there.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
there's rumor, and obviously this ain't the first time we've seen the Night Sisters reanimate the dead. So that's why this theory has big ground that Thrawn's going to use this army of like zombies to try and take over or build up his own order.
Okay, interesting.
That's rumors and theories that I've heard.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where they move for. I mean, a little bit less so now that you've told me that with Filoni and Favreau saying that they're not going to retcon the sequel trilogy, because that's where I was kind of hoping this was all going. But I'm still interested
I
to see
mean,
where they go.
they could. This interview that I'm thinking about was obviously a couple of years ago, uh, with like the introduction of Mando when it picked up steam, because it kind
Okay.
of some of the stuff they did early Mando was kind of almost contradictory of what the sequel trilogy did. But with seasons 2 and 3, they kind of reassure that no, we're not rewriting uh we're not retconning the sequel trilogy. So that's what I don't know. They could probably go back on their word because Favreau and Filoni have been known to lie about a couple things.
Yeah, true.
There's potential that they uh, could potentially retcon it, but at this point, I doubt they will.
So one thing that, and this is just a small little funny thing that made me laugh when I was watching the finale today. So last night while I was at work, I was listening to a commentary on The Last Jedi, and the people who were doing it uh, made a point how since Disney took over, and this commentary was from before Rise of Skywalker came out. It was from a few years ago,
Hmm.
but they made a point where they're like, ever since Disney took over Star Wars, everything that they've put out has had a scene where like the main characters have disguised themselves as stormtroopers. Force Awakens has it. Um, Rogue One has it. Last Jedi has it. Um, Solo has it, and Rebels has it. And then it happens again in Mando season 2. It happens yet again in this show. In the
So, well, hold on. So there's a reason why it happens in Ahsoka, because that's one of Ezra's things in the Rebels was that he likes dressing up as stormtroopers and sneaking in.
No, I'm not complaining. I just think it's hilarious that like this has become a trend in like all of Disney Star Wars, where I don't think this happened in Rise of Skywalker, but the other two movies in the sequel trilogy had it. Both spin-off movies have it. Like it just keeps happening. And I guess if it
Well, because
is
obviously,
part
if
of,
you're trying to infiltrate the Empire, the best way to do that is to obviously use the armor that covers the face.
yeah.
It also has a voice modulator attached to it. That's just an easy way to do it, and I think that's actually more of a trend that started with the original trilogy.
Well,
I don't think
it
it's
was
not
it,
necessarily just the sequel. It's because obviously with A New Hope we have obviously the rescuing of Princess Leia using the stormtrooper armor,
well, that's where it
and then
starts. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll also say then even with Return of the Jedi, kind of Lando sneaking into Jabba's palace disguised as one of the guards.
Yeah.
So that's why I think it's more just a trend set up by whatchamacallit, by the original trilogy.
Yeah. Um I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to bring up about Ahsoka. Um,
I mean, it had its cool moments, but it really, I think, was the show necessary? No,
it
but it did, especially episode 5, I believe, is really what they kind of pivoted around. Just the nostalgia factor and bringing back Hayden Christensen as Anakin, I think, is really kind of what they more or less pivoted on because those were really some really well done scenes
yeah, the show
between all that.
it kind of felt like more of just a bridge show to like be like, okay, we set up Thrawn coming back in Mando. Okay, now Thrawn's back and we're probably going to do some more stuff with that moving forward. It's like they did a whole show just to get Thrawn back in back in the galaxy, and then do like kind of a reverse of what the status quo was at the beginning, where it's like, okay, the show begins with Ezra and Thrawn in exile, and then it ends up with the reverse of that, where the two of them are back in the galaxy, and then the characters that went out searching for them are the ones stranded now.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like it. This is what I hate and like about the new 8 episode miniseries standard that seems to have come out of Disney a lot recently. Is that they don't do filler episodes, which I think is good because a lot of seasons here recently have really only have majority filler episodes and don't get to the story. But the issue is with how short it is, they don't do a full season's worth of action or complete storylines.
Yeah.
Is my biggest thing because obviously I've said it multiple times in this podcast. They left so many of those storylines open ended that I feel like there's another episode that should be dropping next week and kind of wrap at least all the storylines up.
Yeah.
And with because like they're setting up for season 2, but I don't think they've officially announced season 2.
No, I was looking at that earlier. I don't think they have either, unless I just missed something.
I was gonna say that's what I just looked up. It seems potentially in early development, but it's kind of like it. The way they set it up, they really should have filmed this all in one go and then release it. Because now you're going to get a gap, obviously gap time, and so it kind of it's going to play with the storytelling a bit.
Yeah, and I don't need Thrawn to be defeated this season or anything. I'm fine with him with it ending with like him getting back to the galaxy and like something bigger's coming down the line. But there needs to be some sort of closure or at least an idea of what's coming moving forward. Like you said, there feels like there should be a ninth episode coming out because everything just stops. Like there's not even, I mean, there is a cliffhanger, but it doesn't feel like there's a cliffhanger because the way that it all ends just feels like,
Oh, because it wraps up Ahsoka and Sabine's storyline, which is kind of the main storyline of the season. It shows them settling down and before trying to find a way out. So it's almost like they're content with staying there.
yeah, I was thinking about
But then
that.
they leave all these other storylines like Balin, Shin, obviously Thrawn and Ezra. It's like these other storylines are left open.
That thing with Ahsoka and Sabine really bothered me, by the way, where they're flying to catch up with the Star Destroyer. The Star Destroyer goes into hyperspace, and then they just immediately go back to the planet and are like, okay, we're here now. Like, there's no like discussion at all of like we're gonna try to find a way off here, we're gonna go back. It's just immediately, well, we're settling down because that's it. Like
I mean I see where you're coming from, but then also you have Thrawn and Ezra that have been on Peridia for what 10 to 15 years at this point. Actually, no, I think it's closer to 18 or 20. But like they've been on on Peridea for that long. Only could they leave once Morgan Elsbeth got there.
Yeah,
So it's one of those. It's like there's no reason to rush if it's going to take 2 decades until someone else could potentially get there.
I just wish there was like at least a little bit, like a line of like, it may
A
take a while,
little
but we're gonna get
bit of
back.
urgency,
Yeah, instead of
or
just,
explaining why they just get back playing it and then just settle down.
yeah. That was more my issue with it is they're in the ship, hyperspeed, and then cut, they're just settled down with those creatures. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, like I'm fine with a cliffhanger at the end of this, but it doesn't even feel like a cliffhanger because it feels like there should be another episode after this. Like it feels like it just ends real
Yeah.
abruptly, and that was the
Because
most.
that's what I remember watching it last night when it dropped and the credits started rolling. I immediately started flipping for a post credit scene.
Me too. That's what I
'Cause I'm
did.
like, there has to be more. This is such a why end it here? There's so much more storytelling.
And
Unless that's what they're trying to do, which there has to be a better way of doing it. Because this was, I'm looking at some of the reviews, and everybody's hating on it because it just ends abruptly.
and if you had to end it this way, all you had to do is do the Marvel thing and at the end have text on the screen that says Ahsoka will return or something like that. Like something that says this is going to continue. Because, like we were saying earlier, we don't even know if season 2 of this is happening. Like, how is this storyline going to continue? How is it going to be resolved? We don't know. And if a season 2 is happening, it's a few years down the line. So when are we going to get any conclusion
Yeah,
to this?
nothing's been officially announced for season 2. Though I've heard some things about pre-production, and also I heard it obviously with the writer's strike going on. I don't know how much they actually could potentially say uh, if there is a season 2 or how much they've started working on it.
Yeah,
This
that's
writer
true.
strike's been going on for a minute, so I don't know how much they've got done before that started, because that could also be playing into some of the things. 'Cause I believe that just ended. At least some of the major stuff of that ended last week. I think there's still a few more minor stuff that's going on regarding all that, but obviously that sets a lot of television movies back a couple years.
Yeah,
So nothing was going on during that entire strike.
right. Yeah. I,
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what they do with the next few shows or movies. If they'll try and do try to tackle some of that, or if they'll just leave it open ended for potentially season 2.
what's next? What's coming out? What's the next Star Wars thing coming?
I don't think there's when's is it Skeleton Crew?
Oh, I forgot about that.
Uh I guess technically we have Skeleton Crew coming out in the it gets coming out holiday season.
Okay. There's also is there's also that.
I take that back. It looks like it got postponed to 2024.
Okay.
So
I was about to say because I would think that there would be a trailer for that if it was coming out holiday season, but
yeah, no, I think with the writer strikes that got pushed back a little bit.
okay.
but I don't know. I don't think there's anything else because it was Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, and then I think it was supposed to be Waititi's movie.
Oh, is he still doing that? I hadn't heard
I've
anything
heard
about that
mixed
in a
things.
while.
Uh, okay, here. So here's what's next for Star Wars. Skeleton Crew, Bad Batch season 3, Andor season 2, and the Acolyte.
Uh, okay, so Skeleton Crew, I don't know anything about, but that's the unless that's set like earlier in the timeline, that's the only thing that could potentially tie into this. Because, of course, Bad Batch is right after Clone Wars, Andor is before New Hope, and I'm pretty sure the Acolyte is High Republic era.
Yeah.
So,
So I'm seeing uh it so Skeleton Crew is looks like it's about 9 years ABY.
okay. So, right
So
about
it's
when.
right around when Ahsoka takes place, so that this same post Empire time frame.
So, that might tie into this some. I doubt that would get into a lot of the
I don't
Force
see why
side of
it
things,
would.
but that might at least, you might get a mention of Thrawn's back or something at the very least. Um,
Maybe.
but that's the most you'd get.
Yeah, because I think I'm seeing this next movie is supposed to start production in 2024.
And which one's that?
I don't know. It just says next movie, so I don't know if
Oof.
it's. Let me see if I can find a director.
I know Filoni's supposedly got a trilogy in the works, but I don't know what the plot of that's supposed to be.
I don't know. I just know this next movie looks like it's around Rey's new Jedi Order.
Oh, well, there you go. So they're not retconning sequel
No.
trilogy out of. I forgot
No.
that was happening. Okay.
Yeah,
That
no, but nobody was thrilled about that announcement.
that's disappointing, but whatever. Um, okay, but yeah, so like this show just abruptly ends, and then there's nothing coming out within the foreseeable future that will probably
Yep.
continue this story at all.
Nope.
And that's why I'm saying that even if it does have to end on a, even if it is going to end on a cliffhanger, there needs to be some sort of hint that this is going to continue because who knows when we're going to get any resolution to any of this stuff.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, this is everything kind of slated through end of next year. If they announce, well, actually, I don't even know what would potentially. I mean, Skeleton Crew is the only thing that's potentially looks like it could get in to this era, but there's really nothing immediately coming out unless they announce Ahsoka season 2.
Yeah.
That probably won't be until 2025, 2026 before we even get anything for that.
I kind of don't want a second season of this show. I just going off of the finale, I kind of want this story to continue in something else. Because if you're gonna make an Ahsoka season 2, obviously you would want to focus on Ahsoka a lot as the main character. And
That's not where the story's going, though.
yeah, and this ends with her stranded on a planet. So like this the whole first half of the season is them trying to figure out how to get to this planet. And so, what is the next season just going to be them trying to figure out how to get off this planet? Or is that going to be resolved in like the first episode? Or,
It'd probably be something similar to what they did with this season. Is first half of the season trying to get off of the planet, and then the second half's dealing with Thrawn and Ezra.
yeah.
It's probably how they would do it. It's probably based off the formula they've set up would be the best way to do it. But obviously, I don't know. Based off the response of Ahsoka with the season, if they would potentially try and do it in a similar fashion, or if they just wait and do it in a movie.
Yeah.
Because as far as I can tell, Skeleton Crew is going to be its own thing, and is not going to tie into, not going to tie into the storyline.
Gotcha. Okay.
Only thing that I could potentially see tying into the storyline is if they do Mando season 4, and it's going to get Ahsoka or something.
Yeah. But then if season 4 is just about the Mandalorian culture as a whole, then I don't know how you tie it into that necessarily.
Yeah, that's what I don't. The whole that Lucasfilm has dug themselves into with where they're at in storytelling is going to be interesting to see how they get themselves out of it.
So I don't have a ton of time left because I have to leave in a little bit to go somewhere. You want to just go ahead and get into that with like the state of Star Wars as a whole?
That's been this whole podcast, buddy. I don't know what you've been listening to.
it has, but just
not as much as Ahsoka as we wanted. This has been
yeah.
all right. Here's our dislikes from what Ahsoka done and where it leaves Star Wars.
Yeah.
So I really don't know much more we can go into that because we've already covered just about everything.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Star Wars. So when
It's interesting.
yeah, when Disney got rid of the old EU and turned it into Legends, their reasoning for doing that was to clean up the continuity and make everything more streamlined. And it has not been that way. And like I'm fine.
I mean, everything up to Ahsoka kind of was, because with Mando and Book of Boba Fett kind of continuing running simultaneously, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Andor obviously set in its own, or not its own timeline, but its own time period prior to Rogue One and A New Hope. Kenobi's set post Revenge of the Sith, obviously well before A New Hope. So those kind of fit in seamlessly, and they're kind of open-ended on where they can go with what they want to do. Ahsoka's really the only one that's kind of, well, we left it open-ended enough with nothing in sight. Let's maybe play around with what we got.
Yeah.
But then also trying to fit it within the sequel bounds of the sequel trilogy is kind of where it doesn't make sense. If you're trying to keep the sequel trilogy, it's a little tricky. But if you're branching your own, there's potential. It's kind of like they got it set up pretty interesting to see how they tackle keeping this sequel trilogy, but then also doing this whole other Thrawn event that doesn't get talked about in the sequel trilogy.
Yeah. Do you think that they should have, instead of just discontinuing Legends entirely, they should have kept that going as like its own separate thing where like new stories could come out under the Legends banner, and then you have the canon stuff as well. And maybe not push the Legends stuff as hard as it was, but have it keep going as like its own side continuity type thing.
Uh, I would say no, because I feel like that would also make it a lot worse for new people coming in. Because there's already a divide within the Star Wars community. Because there's those that just strictly watch the movies and or television, but then they don't watch any of the cartoons.
Yeah.
And so that's what there's already kind of disconnect. Because obviously there's the ones that watch everything, and then there's those that just watch the live action stuff.
Yeah.
So there's the disconnect between that. But then if you go and throw in just all the legends alongside everything, and if you're jumping back and forth between the different timelines or stories, whatever, I could see it getting really confusing very quickly. So I'm kind of glad they got rid of Legends in that sense, and not bring anything new in. But then you're also missing out on a lot of great storytelling that took place in Legends.
So maybe they should have done more adapting of Legends, because they haven't done much of that other than
No, because
Thrawn,
there is
really.
already a great story regarding the Yuuzhan Vong War, and where most of at least that part of Legends takes place. They simply adapted that and gone that route with the sequel trilogy. I feel like a lot more fans would be satisfied with what Star Wars would be than rather what it is now.
And like you don't have to straight like do a direct adaptation of everything. You can just take elements from Legends. We didn't really talk about Thrawn in Ahsoka too much, as far as
Well, because he really didn't show up until the last couple episodes.
yeah. But
The
what do you
Good.
think of like his characterization and everything? How do you think he was handled when he did show up?
I thought it was a good continuation from Rebels, because he's always been the cool, calm, collected strategician of the Empire. He's knows everything, uh, strategic, plans everything out. Nothing catches him by surprise. And so that's what I'm glad they kept that aspect of him, and then also brought in the voice actor from Rebels to play him. Because then we also still have the voice and the way the actor carried themselves as Thrawn. I think was actually really well done.
And that's the point that I was making is like they've overall done a pretty good job in Rebels and in this, and from what I understand in some of the new canon novels, adapting Thrawn from Legends and adapting him into this new canon. They've not done any direct adaptation of anything from Legends, but they've taken that character and very successfully implemented him into the new canon. You could do that with so much stuff from Legends, and they've not done that with almost anything other than Thrawn.
Thrawn's the only one, from what I can tell, is more or less a direct rip from Legends. That's the only thing they've. I don't even think they've adapted any of the other smaller storylines. Thrawn's just the straight rip, so that's what it'd be curious to see if they do try to do some of the other storylines. But I know Thrawn was one of the big fan favorites from Legends, and so that's what I've heard. A lot of people are glad that the way they executed him in Rebels and in Ahsoka was really well done.
Yeah. Um, uh, That's I'm just surprised they didn't do more of that. Because again, you don't have to do a direct adaptation of any particular storyline, but take elements, take characters, and adapt them into new but similar stories. You know,
Yeah.
because uh, they've done a lot of good things since Disney's taken over Star Wars. I'm not gonna act like everything they've done has been bad, but they also have done a lot of bad. And I think that if, take for example, Kylo Ren, where they were taking a similar idea to what was in Legends with Han and Leia having a kid who was force sensitive, who fell to the dark side and everything.
Yeah.
But they did that really, really poorly in the end with how that all was ultimately handled. I like Kylo Ren early on, but I think by the end of Last Jedi and then especially in Rise of Skywalker, all of that is pretty poorly handled.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I'm getting into Legends continuity slowly because um, I think that is a bit more of a, from my understanding at least, more of a cohesive universe than what is going on in current canon. Um, and I'm not like abandoning current canon as is, but looking more into Legends and trying to get more into that stuff for
It
sure.
is definitely better from what I've heard and read. It is definitely a better story than what we got with the sequel trilogy.
It's definitely better as far as continuing the stories of the original trilogy characters
Because
because
obviously, yeah, 'cause with main storyline I'm thinking of is the Yuzon Bong War. Obviously, you still have Luke, Leia, and Han, and then you see uh, their families. Obviously, with Han and Leia's, I believe it's 3 kids. Luke and Mara Jade's 1 or 2.
I'm pretty sure it's one.
Is it a one?
I
Okay,
think
so
so.
I think Han and Leia have 3, and then like they have 1 or whatever. But like seeing the family dynamics, and then also the storylines that come from that, because obviously you have Jason Solo becoming becoming a Sith Lord or whatever, and then having to fight his twin sister. I believe ended up killing Mara Jade. Some of those storylines are better than the Force dyad we got with Kylo Ren and Rey, whereas kind of what they were hinting at a little bit,
Ye-
pulling that kind of relationship from Legends. At
yeah.
least how I saw it.
And then
But that's good.
I was just going to say, and then on top of that, with how they handled the original trilogy characters in the sequels, where Luke and Han are kind of just ultimately losers at the end, where like they both just abandon everything, and then you know Leia's awkward because they have to work around the death of Carrie Fisher, so she like doesn't get much to do in those movies at all, and then Lando
Yeah.
just shows up at the end to do nothing. Like they don't do anything cool with any of the original trilogy characters, and so it's just
If they kept the original trilogy characters out of the sequel trilogy, it probably would have been better storytelling. But I think because they were trying to bring in some of the nostalgia factor for at least for the older Star Wars fans. I think that's where it kind of did them dirty because obviously, yeah, kill off Han Solo in the first movie but then bring him back as like a force ghost slash hallucination from Kylo Ren
I'm pretty
in the
sure it was
third
just a
movie.
straight up hallucination. I don't even think it was a force ghost.
Was still Han Solo coming back in that third movie after they already killed him in the first one. You know that kind of was done poorly, and then you have Luke. I never liked Luke's characterization in the sequel trilogy
Me neither.
because I refuse to believe that if you saw more or less what happened, seeing his nephew have bad dreams, more or less, I don't think he would act as he would. Because I feel like it would be one of those. He would act like his Return of the Jedi self and try to redeem Ben Solo, not try killing him and stopping the Sith to return or whatever.
You're somehow supposed to believe that Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi is the same guy who refused to kill Darth Vader because he thought he could still have good in him and was willing to die himself versus kill Vader. And yet we're still somehow supposed to believe that he's willing to go to the lengths with Kylo Ren that he did.
Yeah, and then when tragedy struck, you think he would run away and hide, on this abandoned planet
Yeah.
and refuse to train Ray. Like that's not. I can see him go on a spiritual journey because it's kind of like what he did in Legends.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as just giving up on the Jedi in general, I really don't think that's what Luke would do.
Yeah.
I almost want to say something similar happens in Legends. I could be mistaken, but I believe it might not necessarily be like his school of Jedi get killed, but I know definitely like when Jason goes to the dark side in Legends, like obviously he kills Luke's wife. I think turns like their son into like as his apprentice for a bit before he gets redeemed or whatever. Like Luke didn't run away from his problems. He confronted them and redeemed them. Like he didn't just run off and hide like he did in Last Jedi.
Yeah.
That's what I hated the most about that.
Well, unfortunately, I have to leave in a few minutes, so I'm going to have to go ahead and end this here. But any final thoughts on your hopes for Star Wars moving forward?
My only thing is I hope they do a better job of wrapping up this Thrawn, Ahsoka and Thrawn storyline. Because it was really just left open-ended
Yeah.
with this season finale.
And hopefully it's not like a few years before. I mean, it's going to be probably at least 2 years, but hopefully not
it's
more
at least going
than
to be
that.
3 or 4 years. But yeah, hopefully
Yeah.
it gets tackled within their next couple of projects.
Yeah. But so yeah, I don't know how often Michael and I will be able to do this. Hopefully, we'll be able to do this more often than once every couple years, because that seemed to be our trend recently. But hopefully, we'll be able to get these out more often. But
Also, say to be fair, we were both in school at that time. We'd gone off separate ways, so
yeah, we've had a very busy past couple of years. But hopefully, we'll be able to get these out semi more often, because
hopefully.
admittedly, I don't have many people in my life at the moment to talk about this stuff with, so it's fun to get to do that here.
Same.
But yeah, thank you all for listening. Hopefully y'all enjoyed, and we'll be back soon with more stuff. We'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Bye.